Hey guys, what's going on? Today I am going to remove my exhaust loop. It's where the exhaust from the engine comes in and meets with the raw water, because this is a water filtered exhaust, and then it goes into a muffler. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to check to make sure there's no carbon buildup in the exhaust. And I suspect that could be happening. I've done some research. And the reason I'm looking at this is because we've had some issues with the exhaust. When I was coming into this harbor in Annapolis, we had quite a bit of following seas the previous day. So I thought maybe water was backing up into the muffler, causing me problems, but I was getting exhaust fumes in the back cabin here, and the carbon monoxide detector was going off, was activating. So I looked at it, and what I determined is that there was smoke, quite a bit of smoke coming out of the exhaust manifold. So I tried to tighten it, it didn't help. And then I found there was a lot of seawater that had been leaking into the sump bilge of the engine. And I thought that was two separate issues. I thought that could have been the dripless stuffing box that I have. I thought maybe water was leaking in there somehow. So I didn't connect the two issues. So when I opened up the engine compartment and started playing around with it and investigating, what I found out is that at low RPM, water was coming back into the exhaust manifold and dripping all over the engine and getting down into the bilge and pouring out of there. But at higher RPMs, it wasn't. I could blow it out. What I am thinking is happening is that water is filling into the exhaust manifold. It's going into the muffler, but there's not enough pressure to push it out. So that's why I think there might be carbon buildup. So that's my best guess. So I'm going to attack that and see what happens. So here is the beast in question here. Right here is where the exhaust comes out of the engine. It comes from my turbocharger. Right here is my turbocharger. Hot exhaust comes out of here, and that's why it's wrapped. It goes up this loop, and on the other side of this loop, there's a hose that comes from the heat exchanger. What the heat exchanger does is there's a fresh water side, which I have coolant in, and that continuously circulates in the engine. There's a pump for that. But there's also a raw water side, or in this case, it's salt water. Salt water is pulled out of the ocean, or wherever you are, and it's cycled around baffles inside that heat exchanger, and then back out. Where it comes back out is into this exhaust loop here. On the other side, there's a hose, and water comes into here, and it's supposed to drain into this muffler and then be pushed out of the boat with pressure. And that's not happening. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just loosening these bolts, and I'm going to pull off all this insulation to see what's going on. Okay, I was able to get those bolts off pretty easily. These are the bolts. They're double-ended threads, with that one's like crimped on there and rusted to hell, so I'm going to try to get new bolts for here. My next task is to pull these off, pull all this insulation off here. Like with anything on a boat, I had to pull apart all kinds of other things in order to access the space I needed. Pull this guy off the wall because I had to get this, there's an access panel here that was bolted. My raw water filter was bolted. And now I have access to the loop. This right here is where the raw water comes into the exhaust loop. So I need to take all this stuff off in order to get this thing out, see what it looks like on the inside. The gasket I pulled off looks pretty rough. Definitely get a new one of those. Doesn't look like it's doing much. The inside doesn't look that bad to me, really. I don't see any buildup there. I don't really want to take this thing off, but I think I'm going to have to see the rest of it. Be able to get those clamps off the hose that runs from the heat exchanger to the loop. You can see that that one's definitely pretty rusted. Look at that. But I'm going to replace those, and then I'm going to try to get this hose off right now. So I got this out. It's still hooked up to the hose in the vented loop, which I have to pull out right now. And these hoses are always fun to get off. See, I got some chafe right here, wearing right through the rubber. I don't think I had any leaks from here yet. When I put a new hose back on it, I'm gonna see where this was and then put some chafe protection on there. That could cause big problems. Now I got it off, now what do I do? It doesn't look like there's that much buildup to me. It just looks like carbon dust on this side, and even on the other side it's not too bad. See, on this side, doesn't look too bad. I was hoping like to be a huge amount of carbon buildup and the orifice would be like really small and I could say, yeah, that's my problem. The only thing I can think of is the gasket's totally shot. I'm gonna replace the gasket. While I have this thing out, I'm gonna replace the hoses because those are pretty bad. Like I showed you the one that was chafed. So now I have to find a Yanmar dealer once I pulled this apart. Well, I discovered the problem. There's a big crack. This is a custom exhaust loop. When I went to Yanmar to get a part, they said, oh yeah, this is custom. I was like, why would it be custom? Talked to my mechanic, the guy who did my heat exchanger. He's like, they do custom stuff all the time on boats. Why? He said, yeah, he said he just did a job where he had like a 3-foot long custom stainless steel loop. I was like, wow. But anyway, this is cracked. It's not just a small pinhole or something like that. So I'm gonna have to have this stupid thing refabricated, or maybe this one in the area. The crack is right here. So here's the weld, where the flange is welded onto the loop, but it's not even cracked at the weld, it's cracked before the weld. This is a stress crack, and I know why too. Pisses me off. There's a bolt back here, and the bolt was put on there. There's supposed to be a rod. There's a rod that ran back to my engine mounting bolt right here, and this is what was supposed to support that sucker from vibrating. I need to get a new bolt for that. I need to get a new one of these, and that's, I don't know, 3 weeks maybe. Right, so if I take this exhaust loop off, we're not going to be able to run the engine. And we're at a mooring right now. I don't know how long we can stay on this mooring. But if they throw us off, we can always get Towboat US to tow us someplace. So that'll be our backup plan. Otherwise, we're kind of dead in the water. We can't go anyplace. I was able to get the parts I need. They're individual little studs that go into the turbocharger. The ones that were in there before, these were not the correct ones. These what should be in there. So one end goes into the turbocharger and the other end sticks out, and the gasket goes on here, and then the end of the exhaust goes on here. And also I was able to find proper bolt that secures the engine to the base of the boat. That also served two purposes, because there was a bar that extended from that bolt up to the exhaust that held it secure, and I think because that was not there was maybe one of my problems why it broke where it did. I get the exhaust back, and it was cut, the piece out that was had a big crack in it, and they repaired it by welding it. I will take one of these studs. There's a shorter end and there's a slightly longer end. If you look at it, the shorter end goes into the turbocharger, so I'll put 2 nuts on it and I will put it into the turbocharger. So I put the 2 nuts on there. What that allows me to do is, once I get the stud into the turbocharger, like those guys are, it allows me to back out the nuts easier. I also put just a dab of dishwashing liquid on there. You can also use hard soap and just put some soap on there too. It just helps it thread a little bit better. All right, so I got it started. I'll hand tighten it. And then what I'll do is I'll get my little ratchet, just tighten it down. I already kind of cleaned out the holes where the bolts go in with some WD-40. I also took these bolts and kind of cleaned out the threads by going in and out, back and forth kind of thing, tightening, loosening, as they got looser and looser, just to get any of the crud out of there. And that just makes this process so much easier. And then it doesn't feel like you're gonna break the bolt. And I just kind of snug it. And then what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna quickly, will this work? Just quickly just pop this guy right off. It should pop back off real quick. If I just, no, maybe not. I can't do it with the camera in my hand. I need 2 hands to do it. It's kind of like quick. Oh, got it. There we go. Okay. All right. And now my 3 studs are in there and they're ready to go. What I'm probably going to do is actually going to take this one back out. I just wanted to make sure it goes in and comes out easily. And fit my gasket over the top of these so it just kind of sits nicely. I don't have a lot of room with the exhaust, so I'll try to get it on these bolts first, just rest them, and then there'll be some play down here and I can maybe screw that in after the fact. That's what I'm going to try to do. Okay, the gasket is on. It fits. It just kind of pops on here. It only goes on one way, which is pretty good. So now I just have to wait till I get my muffler back and pop it on. So this is the weld that they did. They re-welded this bead here, put a nice big bead on here, and then they welded a piece in here to connect them. So they did a great job. Very, very happy with this. This will last a long time. I'm wrapping the exhaust now for temperature to keep it from being really, really hot on the outside. Crazy, crazy hot to like start a fire kind of thing. Supposedly it is more efficient for the exhaust. was able to pretty easily get the unit back onto the various places it needs to be, which is the muffler right here. Just have to tighten up these clamps. And then a more concern was the flange, and that seems to fit well as well. And the gasket's in there, and I'm just going to tighten this baby up. Right here is the heat exchanger. So what this does, if you're not familiar with a marine raw water heat exchanger, the engine has, like a typical car engine, it has closed loop of antifreeze and water mixture that cycles through the engine. And instead of having like a radiator to have air cooled, it has seawater or water external from the boat sucked into the boat through an impeller, and it cycles through this heat exchanger where there are a bunch of tubes in here, and it allows the heat to be exchanged from the hot water and cool the engine, and that hot water is pushed out of the boat through this hose right here, which then just does a loop and goes over here. It goes up to a vented loop up top here, so that you don't get any siphoning, because what can happen is if water can get sucked back into the engine if you don't have a way to prevent a vacuum there. And then the hose comes down and it goes into my exhaust pipe, and this is where the hot exhaust from the engine, in my case after it goes through a turbocharger, comes out, and the hot exhaust gases mix with hot seawater and create a concoction, and that's what's vented out of the side of the boat through this muffler. There's a water lift muffler. Right here is where that bar comes down from the exhaust. It is supposed to be supported by a nut, which I just replaced because there was no nut there supporting that bar. So I think that was definitely a big contributing factor of why the crack was right here. It just wasn't supporting, it was vibrating too much. So now with a nice new weld and repaired hose, I'm going to tighten these all up and light the fires and kick the tires on this baby. Just ran a test run on the engine, started up, ran at 500 RPM for a while. Water was coming out of the muffler. I checked for leaks, didn't see any leaks. Tightened up my bolts a little bit. You know, as you get some vibration and some heat, things loosen up a little bit, so I tightened up my bolts. Initially, I noticed just a little puff of smoke coming right out of here. I tightened it down a little bit more and it went away at high RPM. Brought it up to 2,500 for quite a while, and there was no smoke. It was operating properly. The engine didn't overheat. The engine was running at 190. It typically runs at. Smoke went away. I can just kind of see a little gap there, but I can't really do anything else. I'm happy with what I've got here. So guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this video useful. To recap, I found an issue with my water exhaust. Eventually found out that there was a crack in it. I got it welded and put it back on. And I replaced a couple things as I went along. Some studs, some things I wasn't happy with, and a vented loop. Took a few days to do it, but you know, that's kind of what happens sometimes. If you guys have found this very useful, like and subscribe, and click the little button that makes you get every single video. And let me know what you found useful about this, and if you want to see other things. So you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.